जानना है how you can land a job in the world of coding? कौन सी स्किल सीखनी मैंडेटरी है आज मार्केट में? नीड समवन जो आपके नॉन प्रोग्रामिंग बग्स को रिमूव करने में हेल्प करे? तो है ना हम। हेलो एंड वेलकम टू फिक्सिंग द बग। बने रहें फॉर ग्रेट टिप्स, एडवाइस एंड अ जॉली गुड टाइम विद द एक्सपर्ट्स फ्रॉम द इंडस्ट्री। Until now, we've connected with deans and chancellors of various universities and colleges and talked about how the curriculum can be improved to make the students industry ready. We've connected with IT professionals working in the industry and got advice on how to crack an interview, what skills are required, what's trending in the IT sector. And today, we speak to someone who is running a fast-growing startup. Why we talk to him? Well, to give you an idea on the entrepreneur side of the industry, how to build a startup, how high growth startups run, what are the ups and downs involved, how can you prepare yourself for it. But you ask what's in here for the ones who want a job? Well, you would get to know the kind of qualities these fast growing startups, product driven, mission driven companies look for in a candidate, what possible growth you can see, how important is collective effort, all the good things. So, plenty of questions that require an answer, main ones being whom are we going to talk to and what does their organization do? Ready to learn the details? Let's find out. Fixing the bug. Powered by Code Quotient. Now, before we dive into the conversation, I just want to remind you that we are not doing this one way. It's not just I talking to you or I asking founder the questions. It's also a two-way communication where you can send in your questions, your feedback, your suggestions, everything that you want to write. So go to www.codequotient.com, that is www.codequotient.com, and send in your suggestions. We would be more than happy to receive them. With that said and done, let's dive into the conversation. We are in conversation with Alekh Sanghera, who is the co-founder of FarMart, which is India's first SaaS-led B2B food supply platform. FarMart is agritech company that enables agricultural retailers to serve farmers better by providing access to inputs, advisory, and market linkages. Their goal is to make food distribution equitable, transparent, and financially rewarding for the agribusiness community across the country. And as far as I can see, honestly, rare few people venture into this world of agriculture to empower the farmers either directly or indirectly. But talking to you, Alekh, how did this idea come up? How the investment funds were acquired? How the overall funding was taken care of? We'll learn about all these things very steadily. So first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Shivangi. It's an absolute pleasure to be on this. Yeah, I would love to share my journey and whatever learnings I've got along the way that can help students or other tech professionals kind of bolster their careers. So yeah, super excited and thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure and thank you for giving your time. Now talking about FarMart, how I want to know the conception of this. How did you get the idea of starting FarMart?
Sure. I mean, there's a very long story, but me and my co-founder, who we went to the same boarding school, actually, Mehtab, we've known each other for 21 years. There was an inherent passion to always start a business. And when we were small, like, startup was not a word, to be honest.
Right.
It was more like, starting a core business or some business. But, all along the way, we were very passionate about just being our own bosses, I think. But what happened is that while we were doing consulting in our early days, we kind of realized that the first layer of companies, like the Olas, the Flipkarts of the world, started to build around. I think 2011, 12 was when the time when they just took off the ground, and then like 15, 14, 15, 16 is when like the first layer of like hyper funding and a lot of VCs started to enter the market. So we kind of saw during that time that it's really possibility that without leaving the country you could actually make money, do good, and kind of build a business here. So I think during those days there were very few companies who were kind of building for Bharat. And what we kind of understood through our journey and through our experiences that if you look at a sector which is kind of unsexy or people don't want to be in, have a very long term view about disrupting it, you could basically create a very massive company over a period of time. And we took a very long term view, to be honest. It's counter to a lot of entrepreneurs who want to jump in and kind of build a company within a year and like raise millions of dollars and kind of build a huge company. But we always took a very long-term view of the market. Which are sectors which are very unsexy, which are sectors which will have less competition, which are sectors which will also like digitize very fast, but also which will scale like multitude, or there's a possibility of scaling multitude levels over a period of time. So I think that was like the initial idea of starting up in the food and ag space.
Hmm.
We all know it's one of the largest sectors, employment wise, GDP wise, as well as like it's a $400-500 billion market, right?
Hmm.
So the opportunity to build something huge in this space was always exciting, and because we also had a personal touch to the space, whereas my grandfather was a farmer, my dad was a
Hmm.
farmer, so we always came from that background of Punjab boys and kind of understood the space really well, because all our family or friends
Hmm.
were some generation of farmers, right? So because of a mixture of like just having a personal touch plus the market opportunity, we just thought it'd be exciting to start a company in this space.
Hmm. So you first did your like education, your graduation, then you worked for a while, and then you started working on the company, right?
Yeah.
So during this time, like what were the challenges did you see in the agricultural sector that made you think, okay, I we can work upon this and this would help a major amount of people?
Yeah, so if you see the agriculture space, right, or the food space, I would say
Hmm.
you don't need to kind of go and find challenges. They just every nook and corner of being a farmer is like plagued with some kind of challenges, whether it's access to
Exactly.
machinery, whether it's
Because
access to yeah.
the complete picture that we have of being in the agriculture sector is a reflection of struggle for me, like as per a person who sits in a city and does not know the roots would be seeing the agriculture sector as a place where there are just troubles. So how did you like narrow down and try to finding solutions to those problems, like you were stating that there are problems in terms of getting the equipments and everything?
I think it's twofold. One is we used to always look at macro
Hmm.
numbers, right? Like no business, very large business actually. Like it depends. Like you can be a small business who's doing really well, really
Hmm.
profitable. But if you want to build something very large, you have to look at macro numbers. Like so the initial days, like for example, when we started Uber for tractors, we started looking at how many farmers, how many of them own
Hmm.
machinery, what kind of machinery they owned, and all these numbers are available in public data sources, right? So it's not like you have to kind of really do it
Hmm.
on ground, but if the macro story kind of checks out, right, is then you start to go into the micro. Like you go meet
Hmm.
farmers, live with them, experience their lives, and kind of then start to kind of build a thesis around the problem they're
Hmm.
facing. And I think that's kind of the first insight is like don't try to rush after finding solutions because you're so desperate to start a company.
Hmm.
Always look for like the problem, because the problem has to be so deep that when a solution is coming up, you can like have a very tech oriented kind of repeatability solution across the board for it, right? So it's a combination of macro and micro, like whenever you start a company. So I think that's how like we came into exception and we started to think about the space.
Hmm. So, like you mentioned twice, that people try to rush through things, or sometimes it happens that you start a company and you're not able to pull through because you are with a motive ki अरे एक साल में I can earn like millions of amount. Because also in today's day and age we have unicorns which are functioning really well. So in such a scenario, how important it is to hold on to what your idea is and not rush after what makes the most money or what you think might make the most money.
I think what's really important is you have to have a very long-term view about things, right?
Hmm.
So think about this, like if I had to make a like house,
Hmm.
I'd probably do it in a year, right? But if I have to make a castle, it'll
Hmm.
probably take me 10 years, right? So the analogy I always give is like it's very easy to build a house, but it's very very hard to build a castle.
Hmm.
And when you build a castle, you'll also have very tall walls, right?
Right.
Like boundary walls. Now it's very hard for someone else to build another castle because your walls are so tall they can't even look inside.
Hmm.
So always remember that you are starting up for the right reasons, and money cannot be a reason at all. Basically,
Right.
like when we started, honestly, like obviously you have to raise money to survive,
Hmm.
but it was never like that. If we don't raise money, we will like basically that raise the end of the road, right?
Hmm.
You have to start for the right reasons. You have to be extremely passionate about the problem you're solving, because without that, it's just too hard. Like your bad days are so bad that you feel like you're torturing yourself. Why are you going through this time, right? So,
Hmm.
and without having passion, without having a deep amount of emotion to the problem or the space you're working in, there
Hmm.
is just no way that you'll survive it. Either you start to doubt yourself, or you will start
Hmm.
having co-founder issues, or you will start to basically just lose your patience, or you will run out of money. There are just a host of things that will go wrong if you are just not passionate about the space and you're doing it for the right reasons.
Hmm. So I sense it that the condition of giving up is rather easier because no doubt whenever you're running a business, the risk is involved that it might go well or it might not go well. It might not lead as per your expectations. So in such a scenario, how important it is to prepare your heart and your mind that it might go the other way.
So, see, the point is, this is a basic fact, right? Like 90% of startups don't survive the first year.
Hmm.
98% don't survive 3 years, right? So, and like 99.9% actually don't survive 5 years, right? So it's like it's a no-brainer that like the value of death is very very large.
Hmm.
However, that cannot be a reason for you to like basically give up, because I think the reason is simple, that the amount of life skills, understanding, the amount of like struggle you face, like all makes it worth
Hmm.
your time. Because if you start a company, right, like think about it, like when you enter a new company, maybe you're an entrepreneur, you work on
Hmm.
something for 2 years, obviously you worked really hard, but didn't work out for whatever reason. The market
Hmm.
did not work, your solution was too early, you ran out of funds. When you go and tell that story to a person who's hiring, like the person has to be really really stupid, or doesn't have to have the wisdom to identify that you are like one of a kind of a person, right? Like
Right.
when I'm hiring, or when the companies are hiring, like if there's an entrepreneur, just the level of engagement with that person is very different, because we love the hustle, we love what the
Hmm.
person went through. Like you have to have empathy, you have to have like really like strong guts to be able to go through that, right? So we like in my cases, like I would say, the if you look at all hiring data in cross markets or across people, like the people who've actually started up or were early employees at a
Hmm.
company would probably get hired in a percentage level much higher than other people who are just like basically like at a different level, or were just applying for a job. So they're just, we don't
Hmm.
realize it, but there're just too many upsides which are beyond your own journey as a startup entrepreneur. So it's always amazing to kind of like start up for the reason that you will grow as a person, and professionally and personally.
Hmm. So we'll come to these aspects in in coming minutes. But first, I would want to ask you. You told us that 90% startups do not survive the first year, and 98% do not survive the 3 years. You have survived in this journey for more than 7 years. How did that happen, and how that journey had been?
I think it's twofold, honestly. One is
Hmm.
just pure perseverance and grit, and also just taking feedback really, really well.
Hmm.
And second, I think, is more around just being honest to ourselves. To be honest, that
Hmm.
whether something is working out or not, and you would work and improving on yourself. I think the other reason which I would actually contribute for us to survive for so long is that we were just like we didn't know there's a plan B. Like we were like, okay, this is it.
Hmm.
Either we kind of die on our shields, or we basically walk out of this thing. But like the point is like there's no option to quit. I never thought in my single time that how would we
Hmm.
survive, or like what happened, whether we had money or we didn't have money. But the passion was just so deep, and then obviously you learn skills around a lot of things,
Hmm.
whether it's fundraising, whether it's hiring, whether it's building a product or a service. You just learn along the way. And I think those are the couple of reasons which I feel like has really helped us kind of survive this
Hmm.
game.
So I went through your LinkedIn, and therein I found this quotation that you had shared that winning is not everything, it's the only thing. How close do you hold it to your heart now that I see that it's in your practice? How can other people imbibe this behavior?
Yeah, so I think it's just a mentality, to be honest. Our coach used to say it in school, and that time it doesn't make a lot of sense. But
Mhm.
I think 50% of battles are lost before you enter the court,
Mhm.
right? Because you already have so many doubts about yourself, whether you lose. The other opponent is much bigger, they have more money,
Mhm.
they are much more faster. So you already kind of give up somewhere, and then you go out to the court and give a half-ass attempt to like doing something, right? Like, and
Mhm.
that fundamentally is flawed in terms of like your philosophy, because if you don't want to do something with so much grit and perseverance and like passion,
Mhm.
why do it at all, right? So from there what systems is like, there is nothing that can take me down, and the only person who can tell me I've lost is basically like myself.
Mhm.
And winning has very different meanings. Someone it can be starting a company, and someone can be like surviving the entire like pandemic, right?
Mm.
For someone it can be raising the first round. For someone it can be getting money from the first customer.
Mm.
So I think the definition of that winning changes along the way, and every milestone has a different level of winning.
Mm.
But the mindset that be that I'm doing the right thing, and I'm going in the right direction, and I'm winning along the way.
Mm.
Because a lot of small wins, like at the end, amount to like a huge win, right? So the mindset should be like I'm like undefeatable. Like I'm just
Mm.
no one can basically like defeat me except like I tell myself that okay today I'm like lost. So I think it's just a mindset which I'm talking about more about through that quote than anything else.
Hmm. So, like, I understand that the building of that mindset is very important, but there are times when we just feel shattered. And like, I read something about FarMart wherein I understood that the journey was not as smooth and it was very rough. And how did you two literally just come to terms with the fact that no matter the pandemic, no matter the demonetization, no matter what happens, we would pull through? And how much is the social support required in such a scenario? Because we see this, if I am opening my company and it's not succeeding for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, I would have my family and the society come and tell me, Arey, why are you doing this? Go find a job, get a regular income. Why are you risking your life? All of that. And that makes sense too. But how would I just sustain, and how can society change to help me sustain better?
I think it's twofold, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
From taking cue from our journey is like I think the social structure we had around us was just too strong, right? So when I say social structures, I'm talking about our parents, my that time girlfriend, now my wife,
Mm-hmm.
my friends who were never like that. Why are you doing this, right? Like they were always like, "Ho jayega, kar lega," like don't worry, we are there. And I think more importantly, it's also like I still remember so many times my parents would come to me and say that it's okay if it doesn't work out,
Mm-hmm.
and if it doesn't work out, like we are there financially also. And that doesn't mean like I've never taken a penny after I graduated from school, like or from college, right, from them. But just hearing that kind of reinforces your faith in yourself, because by the end of it, like we what we care about is all my friends are making X amount of money from a job, and here am I, spent 5 years of my life still at like no money, like no wealth creation, no status in the society, and so on and so forth, right? So I think you have to fight that a lot, but the only people who can help you fight that is your social structure, like your parents, your partners,
Mm-hmm.
and also your friends, right? And I think by the end of it, like I started surrounding myself with people who would be very encouraging of what I did, rather than like shaming in any way. And because I just distanced myself to those people because they didn't understand my journey,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think you meet a lot of kind of people. It's just like who you want to be associated with, and sometimes honestly, like I feel everyone does not have that privilege. It's very easy for me to sit here and kind of say that your parents would support everything you do,
Mm-hmm.
even though like my parents came from a they were in the army and they were not business people.
Right, right.
But I think what you need to prove to even yourself and them is that you are incrementally growing.
Mm-hmm.
By incrementally growing, I mean is like you're not like sitting for 2 years, you don't have a single product, you don't have a single customer, and you just somehow are wishing that some investor will come and give you money and like your life will change, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to happen. Let's be realistic about things like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you show incremental growth, like even if it's single day, you're improving every day, like people will notice it. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not like people won't notice it and not support you. So I think it's all about like just making sure that you are growing, and with that growth, like people also start to respect what you do. And then beyond that, tough or good times, like you just like have a great group of people around you who support you throughout.
Hmm. So now moving on towards some technicalities of it, you just as mentioned, कि we cannot just sit and hope that investors would come to us and the product would sell on its own. So how do you get the investors on board? It's a very tough process to make someone else believe in your dreams. How do you do that? Having raised over $40 million, which is a big sum, so I want to know, how did that happen?
Yeah, so I think I'm just a very like sales
Mm-hmm.
person. I'll talk to a lot of people, and right from the beginning, from day zero, like whether I was fundraising or not fundraising, I would just like obsessively talk to
Mm-hmm.
people, right? And surprisingly, like the counterintuitive thing was like investors only want to like talk to people who would like be great companies or so on and so forth, right? Like if you think about it, like investors are looking for great companies, like that is their sole goal in
Mm-hmm.
life. Like they have do nothing else to do, like except just find companies, talk to entrepreneurs, talk to young people, advise them, right? So always when you go into the conversation, just like be honest with them. Like just be like, okay, now I think I'm very early, but I want to have a conversation to know about another company you invested in,
Oh.
and this is something similar to what we are doing, but I want to know about your experience. I can assure you, like 99 people out of 100 people will respond and say, okay, let's get on a call, because they want to share, they want to give back, right? That's the thing. And who knows, in that conversation, you are the next like Steve Jobs, or you are the
Hmm.
next person who builds like the next company, right? Because they're just looking for similar people. But if you go into the company like trying to fake that you've already had a great product, like you
Hmm.
have all the customers, they talk to 100 companies a week, right? So for them it's like, okay, this guy or this girl is bullshitting, and this is all bullshit. Like, why am I even talking to her? But I think you have to go it in a very collaborative, honest kind of conversation, and then along the way,
Hmm.
what investors start to care about is this person incrementally or exponentially growing in terms of the product is getting better,
Hmm.
or how is it like, it's countering. No investor writes a check in first conversation. Like, let me just be honest with you. No one comes along and be like, okay, I'm gonna write you $1 million check.
Hmm.
All my early investments, it took me almost 18 to 24 months to just to get to know the person, have 10 conversations. After the 10th conversation, I would like start presenting. The person gets involved. Like, the investors left to get involved and like help you through your journey. So it's to do with a lot of those smaller things and continuous interaction that you become a better entrepreneur, your product gets better, and they see that growth and journey, right?
Hmm.
When they see that over a period of time, they're like, okay, this person is very passionate, this person is dedicated, and this person might actually do something big.
Hmm.
So it's a combination of these 4 5 things that lead for a great outcome, which is called a fundraise, right?
Hmm.
But overall, it's not going to be a miraculous overnight kind of a journey. For some people it might be, but for most people it won't be.
Right. I think the problem is with the narration we build around in the general terms. We show only the happier sides of the stories. We do not go about the struggle that it took 18 to 24 months to convert a conversation into something potential. But while you were having this conversation with potential like investors, what myths do you encounter around farmers or the agricultural industry?
Yeah, so I think the myths I kind of care about is like, they're completely not digital. You can't build a scale company. Most of them are
Hmm.
not illiterate. So I think all of these myths were initially, and some parts is also true, but
Hmm.
like the world is changing very fast, right? So they also recognize it.
Right.
And honestly, like what they care about by the end of it is like, can you build a very tech-led, scalable solution which people are ready to pay for?
Hmm.
Sometimes the companies forget like the third part, which is people are ready to pay for. But the rest of the thing is they care about scale, they care about distribution, they care about people. People are basically farmers or customers, and they care about like monetization, right? So if you can clearly like define these three, four things, that your product is very useful,
Hmm.
people are using it more regularly, and you are also able to make people pay for it,
Hmm.
is the kind of exact answer what a fundraise would or an investor would look for. It's as simple as that. It's not very complicated, but like, obviously the more complicated part is reaching out to investors, talking to them,
Hmm.
getting feedback, 10 more other things. So I think that is where a lot of the people lose their battle. I don't know, I'll get so nervous. Like,
Hmm.
what will I tell the person? It's just like, it's okay if the person is a human being. They just have to have a conversation with the person. If they like you, great. If they don't, like, that's their problem. It's not yours, right? So I think it's a lot of that fear that starts to like, I used to have it,
Hmm.
but now obviously get got better with it.
Right. We need to work upon it. Like I would say, saying this, that we need to tell ourselves, this is just a conversation. If they don't like me, big deal. But when you go there and you face rejection and you come back and you start doubting yourself, like I have been in those situations. So for me, it was very tough to. Even today, I don't think I've come through quite
वो
well.
तो होना ही है ना मैं तो वो तो होना ही है like the point is see most of the people in life like especially today's generation the problem is like your parents tell you you're special,
Hmm.
then you go to a school, the school teachers tell you you're special,
Hmm.
then you leave that, then you basically go to a college, the college people, all your friends tell you you're special,
Hmm.
and then suddenly you step out in this world and you realize, hell no, I'm not special, like so the point is like the point is you are lied to your all your life, I think
Hmm.
fundamentally, and then when the reality hits you don't have the courage or the social system or the EQ to kind of understand, right?
Hmm.
So I think there's obviously most of them are structural societal issues
Hmm.
of the world, but I think, like I said, just surround yourself with people. Like if someone reaches out to me on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
whether it's a student, whether it's a person, whether it's thing, I make it a point to either get on a call with them for even 15 minutes or basically write back to them saying that this is what I think, right?
Oh.
So the thing is like there are enough people out there who are just want to kind of help you.
Hmm.
But the issue is there are not enough people who want to reach out and ask for help, right?
Right.
So I think there's a dichotomy that is prevalent in a society where it feels like, oh, if I reach out and this person doesn't reply, then what?
Hmm.
It's fine. That if you reach out to 100 people, 10 people will reply, right?
Right.
Like 10 is enough for before that you were at zero, right? So I think there's just like some people need to understand that, and if you understand that, you'll actually like do much more like, well in your life.
Huh. I have seen this, like now that you're talking about the general behavior, I've seen that people reaching out are less and people ready to help are more.
Yeah.
And the reaching out part is tough because we have self doubt, we have preconceived notions. That's something I think we should work upon since childhood only. It's how we are brought up in the world to gain more confidence. That's something that can't be done at a later part of the life.
Yeah, and most of the time we aren't special, right? So let's not lie
Yeah.
to ourselves if you are special. So the point is you have to make yourself special by like going through it, right? So
Hmm.
it's a catch-22 situation, to be honest.
So now that we're talking about being special or not being special, to become special and to stand out from the crowd, what all do you think a person can do? It's not in the terms of entrepreneurship or being a candidate, but the soft skills that would make a person the different one.
Yeah, so I think it's very simple, right? Like the point is there are 3 or 4 things you need to do. Like first is like start working very early on in your life.
Mm.
Like what I mean is, it can be literally internship. It can be literally like you go and like become a salesperson for a company.
Mm.
It can be doing telecalling. It can be writing the first piece of code for building a simple app. But just start to work in the real world earlier,
Mm.
because the more you delay it, right, you get away from how the world functions. And in colleges and schools, like I don't know a single like course which I did which taught me how the world functions, right?
Mm.
Like, or how money functions, or like how people function,
Right.
right? So I think what we are taught and what is actually the reality is very far off. And I've noticed generally a trend in some of the most successful people I've seen, that they all start to like hustle very early on in their life.
Mm.
And when they learn that, they would learn skills which are sales, which are talking to people, which are like understanding problems, which
Mm.
are like solving problems. So I think you just kind of end up doing a lot more or learning a lot more when you start to work very early on.
Mm.
I think number one is that. Second is you need to also know like what you are passionate and good at. So for example, if I love people, like what role should I be doing? Courses should I be doing which are like helping me
Mm.
grow that? If you're great at coding, like how do I basically look for companies which will give me that opportunity very early on, or how do I attend more
Mm.
hackathons? How do I attach more things? Like so, just like continuous hustle
Mm.
to be able to understand what you're good at. And once you identify that field, that market, or that space where you're really passionate about something and you enjoy doing
Mm.
it, is then you just like go all out. Like whether it's joining companies in that early stage which are doing this, or some large corporates, or it's like building a small prototype for yourself and to test or just to have fun. Like you can just do a lot of
Mm.
that. So I think it's a three-step journey. First is, like I said, that you start to work very
Mm.
early. Second is identify what you're passionate, what you're excited about, and third is just like go after it. Then
Right.
like, there are 3 things which I'll say which are like really good.
Mm. Now that you have said these things, I would share a very small incident that was funny to me back then and is still funny. I was 17 years old and
Yeah.
I had applied for a job. I was called for the interview, and when I reached there, the person was like, "Oh, you're 17, we can't hire you."
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, "Why did you call me then?"
And that's true, but that's bad on the part of the company that you couldn't get hired. But I would say like that's great that you reached out and you wanted to do this, right? Because
Yeah.
that's half the battle one. To be honest, it doesn't matter if you print paper. Like I tell people like it doesn't matter if you go in an office. You're a person who picks up paper from someone's desk, prints it,
Mm.
and gets it back. But imagine what you're gaining out of that. First, you're in the workspace of really smart people.
Mm.
Second is the person who you're printing for, this person is going to come and have a conversation with you.
Mm.
Now, in that conversation, you're going to learn something. When you learn something, you're conscious, you're like, oh, should I start to search about this topic? And
Mm.
now you start to search about topic. Then this person is seeing you every day in office for 3 months.
Mm.
I can bet you, like the fourth month, the person will come and say, "Hey, well, like, what do you do? Where do you come from? Do you want to get a job? Do you want to? How can I help?" So,
Mm.
it's actually it's very small things that people miss out. Like when we hire people, most of the problems I have is like, "Oh, today I'm a telecaller."
Mm.
It doesn't matter today you're the telecaller. if I see you doing telecalls like amazingly well, do you think I am stupid enough to not tell you to like sales or like head my sales team?
Hmm.
Like, it's not the journey where you start from, it's where you think you can go
Right.
into that company, right? You have to just get the foot in the door, and once you get a foot in the door, people will notice your hard work, people will notice your passion, people will understand how good you are at your job.
Right.
So most of the people get it wrong there only. Like, that is where everyone fails.
Hmm. Makes sense. So, but now that you're telling about this small example, has there been any candidate or an employee from whom you have learned a lot?
Yeah, so I mean, I honestly learn a lot from everyone I work with. I'm obsessed about learning from people,
Hmm.
and this is just not a metaphor, but I always try to like have conversations, and
Hmm.
when I have conversation, like I literally talk to them about, okay, what's happening in the field, like what are you seeing, what are you
Hmm.
hearing, what are the customers saying, because you can never be that close to your customer, how much that person is, right? So,
Hmm. Right.
so I've just learned that you just have to be very, very open to listening, and also listening to their problems and identifying like where they are facing challenges and how you can help them basically. And when you do that, like it's just an insane amount of like continuously learning experience.
Hmm. So, like we have been talking about the candidates, and we have talked about the problems of finding a good investor, and generally how we can start with the startup and everything. But it's very weird that from 2016 onwards, the life had not been very consistent. So there was demonetization, then there was COVID, and even today we have the fear of COVID. Living through all of that, what changes have you seen in the course of these troublesome times in the general market, in terms of like the economy, and in terms of hiring the candidates and seeing the behavior of the people change through the time?
Yeah, so honestly, last 2.5 years has been a very tough time for most of the people, right? Like,
Hmm.
let me just acknowledge that it's not been easy. We've stayed away from our close ones. We've stayed away from our colleagues. We've stayed away from even our education. If you think about it, like most
Hmm.
of people who are graduating today probably would have even entered the premise of a college, right? A lot of the learning happens in that.
Right.
Honestly, it's been a very, very challenging and a hard time. However, what
Hmm.
my fundamental belief is, like, as humans, we are one of the most innovative species on earth.
Hmm.
Like, it took us a month or two, maximum 2 months, to figure out like how the new world starts to function.
Hmm.
It took companies which were there for 70 years, probably like 3 weeks to figure out new protocols, right? It took startups like within few days and weeks to take decisions that would change the world, right? Like in
Hmm.
terms of like how they want to function. So I think the new norm is going to stay very hybrid. I
Hmm.
think I think you cannot replace a physical experience for anything, whether it's education,
Hmm.
whether it's work culture, or whether it's healthcare or
Hmm.
anything. You cannot replace it completely. But what is going to be normalized is just having an extremely hybrid culture.
Hmm.
Like in our office, like we actually probably most of the people come 3 days a week or 4 days a week, or they don't come every day,
Hmm.
and we are okay with it. In most locations where we are operating in, basically we have like unlimited leave policy, because we understand people like sometimes want to take longer times off because they are also working with longer times during while they are at home.
Hmm.
So I think that is going to stay. And because of that, there'll be a very like a lot of new opportunities, because if you're not restricted by the location of how you want to operate,
Hmm.
you can be sitting in any village in this country and being as phenomenal as anyone else in this space, right? So I think that is going to stay for sure.
Hmm.
And also this acceleration to digital is kind of go like multifold, right?
Hmm.
Small stores to big stores, large companies to small companies. Everyone's going to like start thinking very digitally, because hey, what if another COVID wave hits? What
Right.
if another pandemic hits us? Like, so there's a psychological shift in the mindset of people and individuals that is huge, and it will be like unreplaceable.
Hmm. But like you were just telling that the companies are becoming hybrid and a bit more flexible. I think that might be the case with the IT companies. But recently, I have noticed that the companies are still very strict. Like I've gotten in conversation with a few friends of mine who had been applying for jobs in different sectors. They are being asked to work 6 days a week from office and for at least 10 hours. So, in such a scenario, when you know that the company is not good for your mental health, what as a candidate should I be actually compromising with and not compromising with?
So see, there are two schools of thought, right? If you're working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, I honestly don't think that's a bad
Hmm.
thing. Like a lot of people might say that it's a bad thing,
Okay.
but it depends on where you are in your journey
Hmm.
of your life, right? If you've just graduated,
Hmm.
right, you kind of finding your first footsteps in the professional world.
Hmm.
Like I feel for the first 5 to 7 years or 10 years, you should be grinding your ass off,
Hmm.
like 6 days, yeah, 7 days a week, 9 hours a day. I understand this is very counterintuitive, but the point is, how do you think like when you're going to lead a team or start a company,
Hmm.
you are going to understand the ethics of hard work and like agility and perseverance and like a lot of those things
Hmm.
because you haven't done it, right? Because you haven't done it, like you will look for people who are like slackers and who will not have that level of like professional commitment towards it. But obviously, after 5 years or 6 years,
Hmm.
if you are still in the same role, you're not growing, you don't see the growth in the company.
Hmm.
That's a decision which you took, and you're completely wrong about the company you were sticking with, right?
Hmm.
So my thesis is very simple that initially, if you don't work your ass off, you don't build a culture for yourself. And this culture is about just being dedicated, extremely hardworking person who will get their shit done, right?
Hmm.
And then when you know that okay, I've learned this ethic, I've learned this skill set, I've done something, then you start looking for roles which will like suit yourself more. Let's say if you want to get married, you need more time at home. That's fine because companies you will start looking for companies that will give you more time. But they will give it on that base that this person is too good because 5 years, every reference, everything has come through like amazingly well.
Hmm.
So I think it's a lot to do with just the context of things more than anything else. But over like 10 hours a day for let's say 20 years or 10 years or 15 years might be obviously too much, right?
Hmm.
It's not going to help you in your life. So I think it's just the stage of where you are in your company. But out of college, leave it on 10 hours. You should be working 12 hours to be honest.
But
So
in today's scenario, people are very much aware about the health and the work life balance. So everything needs to fall into this comfort wherein they are able to enjoy their life and work hard. So I also find myself telling my friends, Ki, Arey, why are you working for 24/7? I have a friend who takes meetings at 2 in the morning, at 5 in the morning, and then again at 8 a.m. So I always tell,
that's unhealthy. Yeah. Okay, that's unhealthy. So I'm not saying that. Obviously, you have to have professional
hmm.
boundaries.
Huh, I wanted to clear that up because the way you had put it, I also started questioning whether I am like doing wrong to my friend by telling him not to work so hard.
No, no, okay. See, that's intruding into your personal life. When you
Hmm.
say 10 hours, 10 hours is like actually not that much, right? You go to office at 9
Hmm.
and 10 hours finish like at 6 p.m.,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So if you actually work really well, like 10 hours is a long period of time. Now, if you're working 20 hours a day, like in under unless you're like an investment banker or like the markets, you have to open three markets at the same
Hmm.
time. Like then it obviously is something different. But it's all about like I said, perspective. That's where I come
Hmm.
from.
So I have another question like this, which is very based on my experience of life. I understand you're not the hiring manager, you're the founder. Yet, when it's a no for the application, why is the candidate not informed? Does this happen when you reach out to investors as well, that they don't respond only?
See, there are all sorts of people, right? Like, obviously, there are investors who don't respond, who would ignore. But it's a simple rule of like life that people don't like to say no to people,
Hmm.
right? They just want to avoid that difficult conversation,
Hmm.
and it is completely wrong, to be
Yeah.
honest. I feel like we have a policy in the company that we actually write back and call every person who we've interviewed and gone through the process of rejection to give them clear feedback on what happened and whether the role was different or
Hmm.
we expectations were different or your skill set is different and so on and so forth because that creates a level of trust, that creates a level of feedback loop, that creates a level of goodwill,
Hmm.
and also helps the candidate understand whether the feedback they want to take or not is their call,
Right.
but like it helps candidate understand where I went wrong.
Hmm.
I think more companies are doing it. I don't know if everyone's doing it, but it's very person driven. But like at our company, it's a DNA level thing.
Hmm.
But enough investors also in my life have given me feedback,
Oh.
who have continuously called me, who have actually like guided me through it, right?
Hmm.
So there are again all kinds of people. The percentage is very, very less.
Hmm.
Like I said, it might be 5%, but it is still there. But like I said, I completely agree to you. It should happen more. People should be more out there. They should give more feedback.
Hmm.
They should respond because that's what is the right thing to do.
Would you be comfortable in sharing one of the feedbacks that really helped you grow?
Yeah, so I remember talking to this one investor, and the person was like, Alekh, you are literally wasting your time. Like, if you build this for the farmers, it will not work.
Hmm.
The NPA will be like very high. You will not be able to scale the business up very fast, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
And I went back and started to think about the business. And I thought about the business. I was like, this person is absolutely true.
Hmm.
He knows what he's saying. And then I basically like we actually started to make the pivot based on his feedback on the business. And then we went back to him after 3 months,
Hmm.
changed the entire thing and had a different narrative. You're like, okay, now you're in the right path. Now this makes sense, right?
Hmm.
So the point is like I said, there are two things. Getting feedback is one thing, but how open you are about to get that feedback and improve is another thing.
Hmm. Right, makes sense. So, I would want a general view from your perspective that if a student is studying computer engineering and wants to explore entrepreneurship, what initial steps do you suggest for them to give it a head start?
Uh, so basically, I think my two bits to them would be like, like get more passionate about the space, right?
Hmm.
Like I said, get involved and get experience. Work at a company, start your own small project, which is exciting. Talk to customers,
Hmm.
work or intern at places, and then like what the person should be obsessed about is finding a problem, which is actually a problem which many people are facing, right?
Hmm.
But until then, like don't stop at something like because मुझे let's say delivery अब 10 मिनट नहीं 5 मिनट में चाहिए तो मैं अब 5 मिनट की delivery app बनाना शुरू कर दूंगा, right?
Hmm.
So the thing is like the problem has to be very real. The problem has to be very fundamental to
Hmm.
a user and their experience of life. And then once you find it and find a space which is your passion,
Yeah.
it can be education, healthcare, artificial intelligence, it can be robotics, but something which you can spend
Hmm.
like you said, your friend, right? You look at your friend and be like, why are you taking calls at 2 a.m. and 8 a.m.? Like that is the kind of people who will become entrepreneurs. The person will take a call at 2 a.m. and again get up at 6 a.m. because they are so passionate, they don't even know whether this is work or like this is play.
Hmm.
So you can only and only do that if you're obsessed and love like that space of operation like where you're doing.
Hmm. So you identified the problems, not the problems, but like things that can be worked upon in the agri-tech industry. At present, you're working on them as well. For the future, like in the next 10 years, what kind of developments do you think that might happen, and what are the problems that should be found a solution to in the coming years?
See, in the future, I think, at least in the agri space, right, what we see that there are going to be a bunch of things. There'll be food traceability, which will come in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
So, people are getting sick. People want to know what they are consuming, where they're consuming from, how fresh it is.
Hmm.
So traceability is going to be a huge angle to the business. Second is, how do you grow high yield crops with less amount of water, right? I think that is going to be a huge play, huge space because water just as a resource is going to get scarce. We're
Hmm.
going through severe level of global warming and stuff like that.
Hmm.
The third is just the amount of labor it is going to reduce. So mechanization or tools for mechanization, which are low cost, more affordable, is going to be huge. Right? So these are two or three spaces I feel it's going to be huge in the next
Hmm.
like 10 years.
Okay. So this was about the agri industry. Talking about FarMart, what is your current vision and how are you going to turn it into reality?
Yeah, so at FarMart, we basically are trying to build the largest, software-led food supply platform that enables large customers, consumers, exporters
Hmm.
to source high-quality produce close to the farm gate, right? And our vision is pretty simple. Like, can we help the farmers get access to markets,
Mm-hmm.
get them paid on time, at the same time, build a very traceable value chain where the end consumers can actually identify, what food is consumed from where, right? So the vision is very, very clear in terms of where we want to be.
Hmm.
Now, it's just about doubling down on the model and, how we can leverage our data and product to be able to do it, at scale.
Okay. Now that we have like talked about everything, I am short of questions to follow. So we would be wrapping up the conversation in a while. But before that, I would want to know, like you're telling that you prefer people who work hard and you prefer people who are ready to give long times of work to their organization, so you also must be working really hard, 15 hours a day. I think you would spend at least that amount of time. Despite of all this pressure and the hard work, how do you unwind?
Yeah, so honestly, you have to unwind because your brain gets really fuzzy. So what I do is, I like play golf or I play football,
Hmm.
or at least I try to work out 4 times a week in the evenings, right?
Okay.
And then basically like on the weekends I hang out with my friends and like my family.
Mm.
I think those are things which like make you understand what's actually also important in life. We've actually spent 15 minutes of our conversation talking about startups and like how you want to build this company
Mm.
and so on and so forth. But what I feel is like you have to spend enough time out of like this life, because that's what matters. Your friends matter, your family matters, your partners matter,
Mm.
because they are the one who's going to actually spend most of the time or with you and like be there when you are not well or things like that, because that's where you actually feel the most happiest.
Mm.
Building a company is like your child. One day this child is going to grow up and like the child is going to outgrow yourself, and then you
Mm.
have to like look back and be like, shit, man, what do I do now? So I think it's a journey with the company, but you have to have a life outside. Otherwise, without that, you're not the person, or you're not the quality of the human being you should be.
And now that you just said that the company might grow, and then you look back and you're like, oh, what do I do now? So, do you happen to have any new idea for another startup or something?
Yeah, I mean, there are just too many ideas to share in a
Mm.
single call. But like like I said, anything around mechanization, anything around
Mm.
traceability, anything around water resistant
Mm.
crops, you can just do so much. Like otherwise, every market, everything, there's like thousand problems. India is in the country full of problems.
Yeah.
Like you just have to look on the left and there's a problem, right? But just like how what you feel passionate about is the important part.
Hmm. This question might sound a bit strange, but are you happy, Alek?
Yes, I am. I think extremely happy right now
Very good.
in the current phase of my life. To be honest, I
Hmm.
have the company is Touchwood, doing really well. We've hired a bunch of people. We continue to grow. We have enough money in the bank.
Hmm.
Just got married 4 months ago,
Congratulations.
and yeah, Touchwood, my parents are doing well and my family is doing well. So I think
Hmm.
overall, I'm a happy human being. Not every day, but on the overall sense of it, yes, extremely happy.
That's the most important thing. So
Yeah.
before we wind up, quick three questions. So who's your favorite CEO and whom do you follow and look up to?
That's I think the two people I look at. One is in the international
Hmm.
market, right? So I look at Sundar Pichai as one of the most phenomenal CEOs
Hmm.
which our generation's ever had. A super innovative, early stage employee, took the company
Right.
to great heights, and now taking Alphabet to the great heights. I think he's a great
Hmm.
operator. He's very quiet, so which is also amazing because you don't get to see what all crazy things they are doing, but like super impressive guy.
Hmm.
The other person I'd say is like Ashish Mohapatra. I don't know if he's actually an investor also from off business. I think super operator, very realist,
Hmm.
knows what the market wants and what customers want. Those are two people I really look up to, and like Ashish, I'm in touch with. Sundar, obviously, I can't, I haven't spoken to him
Hmm.
yet, but
Reach out to him via LinkedIn. He would reply. Don't worry.
absolutely, I think that's what I'm going to do
Yeah.
soon.
So do you read? What's your favorite book?
So actually, the one true favorite book is actually it's called True Name. So
Hmm.
it's by written by Osho. I try to read it. It's an interpretation of the Japji Sahib in
Okay.
English. So it's a very spiritual plus life lessons book which I really
Hmm.
enjoy and highly recommend it. It's amazing. Everyone should read it.
I would certainly look up for it. Which one's your favorite movie?
I think there are two movies which I always like: Zindagi Na Mile Dobara and
Hmm.
Far Is Gone. I think those are two movies I can like watch 1,000 times and not get bored.
Now, golf, I do not have a lot of knowledge of, but football, who's your favorite player, Messi or Ronaldo?
No, actually, my most favorite player was Frank Lampard from Chelsea.
Ah.
Nowadays, I'm like thinking of who my favorite player is, but like after that, I haven't had a very serious favorite player. But I think like Frank
Hmm.
Lampard was my all-time favorite.
All right. So I think we should wrap this conversation now. It was a very fun yet insightful conversation. And before we leave, do you have anything to say, any words of wisdom, any advice for the listeners?
No, it's just please reach out to me. My email is alekh@farmart.co. You can reach out to me at LinkedIn.
Hmm.
I don't have any specific words of wisdom. You have 15 minutes of the podcast to listen to, and if you do write to me if you like it, or if you have any suggestions,
Yeah.
would love to kind of be in touch.
So thank you for joining the conversation. It was great talking to you.
Thank you, Shivani. It was an absolute pleasure.
There you have it. All the tips and tricks that you might require. And not only now you have the option of reaching out to us, you can also talk to Alekh and get your queries resolved. Or learn about a new way with which you can fix the particular bug that's bugging you, right? We'll be back with more such episodes, but until then, you keep coding, keep learning, and keep fixing the bugs. Fixing Fixing the bug. Powered by Code Quotient.